All right, we'd like to call to attention the Planning Commission meeting tonight is Thursday, January 11th. We're starting our Planning Commission. We'd like to welcome everybody here. Thank you. We're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. We've asked Commissioner Brush if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, let's have roll call. We'll start on this end.
Sandra Steele,
Ryan Chapman,
Kirk Wilkins.
Brianna Brush.
Ken Kilgore.
And we have a quorum. City staff.
Kevin Thurman.
Gordon Miner.
David Stroud.
Okay, great. All right, this is a public meeting. If there are items that you've come tonight to discuss or to bring forward that are not on the agenda, we invite you to come forward, spend about 3 minutes, and state your name and address for the record. We'll open up public comment at this time.
Right here?
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes. Is the mic on?
Yeah,
Great.
well, no. Is it? Okay. I'm Jen Klingensmith, and I know that I sent an email to you guys, and I know that it's on the agenda, but I have another meeting that I need to be at by 7, so if you'll entertain me, do you mind if I make just a couple additional comments now?
Mrs. Smith, could you state your address for the record?
Sure. It's Klingensmith. It's all one word, but it's 287 West Ginger Place.
So I understand that you have something later on, so we'll go ahead and we'll allow it.
Okay, thank
shortly.
you. So did everyone get my email and have a chance to read it? I don't know.
Go ahead, and the time is yours.
Okay.
We'll respond to
Okay.
it as we can.
Well, then in case some of you missed it, I know I sent it out this afternoon, and I don't know how often you check your email, but I'm just going to go over a few parts of the same thing that I sent you today, and I just hope that you consider that in your discussion. I wish I could be here to see it, but I won't be able to. So this is concerning the wildflower development. It's up for preliminary plat discussion tonight. And while I like some aspects of the project, I'm concerned with the math and methods used to calculate the open space and density of the project, as well as the small lot sizes that abut the Harvest Hills boundary. As I have spoken at and attended many of the public meetings where wildflower has been discussed, I am fully aware of the density transfer made because of the 144 acres of the project becoming a freeway. Though I strongly disagreed with that action, as developers should be responsible for getting the fair market value for land when purchased by UDOT, I know that this is a bygone issue. What I wasn't aware of is that Mr. Shipp is also able to count some of the Mountain View Corridor acreage as open space land. Now, David quickly responded to my email and mentioned that this is the detention basin and some trails that will be installed when MVC comes in. The trails are fine. There's not much use for people playing in a detention pond in the middle of a freeway, but I'll let that go. Anyway, on to another issue though. It seems like Mr. Shipp not only received higher densities across his project, including 442 multifamily units, but was also given a break in meeting his 30% open space requirement. The density transfers consolation enough for the freeway project. Mr. Shipp should be required to provide all 178 acres of open space for his 995 acre development. In fact, noting that the residents in this subdivision will live close to the proximity of a freeway, the 30% open space requirement will be especially needed and appreciated. Currently, the city's requirement of 132 acres of open space, the wildflower development is, according to my calculations, 45 acres short of meeting 30% open space for 595 residential acres. It seems disingenuous to me that Mr. Shipp is able to calculate density rights on the entire 595 acres while calculating open space requirements on the remaining 451 acres only. This allows Wildflower to become a denser residential project and not what was represented to the residents in 2014. Most of you know that this land was zoned R3 before Mr. Shipp became involved. Residents were promised that even with the allowed density transfer, I'll conclude this paragraph, that the numbers would be capped in such a way that densities, particularly directly around Harvest Hills, would remain at that level. But that is not the case, as evidenced by the plat maps being brought to the Planning Commission tonight. And if you read my email, you'll see that those calculations basically show that you have 8% of lots that are a quarter acre or bigger, and 34 lots that are between a fifth and a quarter of an acre. I don't think that represents a mirror of Harvest Hills, and David further clarified to me that that mirroring was adjusted to eliminate all cul-de-sac lots in Harvest Hills. Then they averaged the lots that were remaining. Large parts of Harvest Hills are cul-de-sac lots, and to take those bigger lots out to then average and say that's mirroring is, in my mind, smoke and mirrors. And I hope that you guys will strongly consider allowing real calculations done so that he meets the averages at Harvest Hills. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We'll go ahead and address those later on. If you wanted to look at the video later, we're gonna address your concerns when it comes to that item number, if you had to leave early, okay? But we've taken notes, though. Thank you. Are there any other open items that are not on the agenda tonight? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. And we will open up item number 4. And I'll turn the time over to the city for that one.
This for Wilkins, who was reappointed as a planning commissioner this year. Stand. Yeah, will you repeat after me? Will you just hold it? Raise your hand. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties of my
that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity. I feel like I've interrupted the meeting. I'm sorry.
We're not.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's move on to item number 5. That was awkward, sorry. But item number 5.
Item number 5 is preliminary plat of Pirelli Meadows. Nora Shepherd, the planner on this project, and the applicant have discussed that it's not quite ready at this time, but since we've noticed that there could be public here, so we can go through the 3 plats or 1 plat, we've got 3 drawings to look at. Open up the public hearing, take public comment, and then you can decide to close the public hearing and then continue to the next planning commission meeting.
Okay, then we'll turn the time back over to you.
Okay, so Pirelli Meadows obviously was recently annexation into the city, so the applicants are now here for a preliminary plat approval. Again, we'll have 3 different drawings here to look at since it's a larger plat. We're over 100 lots here. So we'll show 3 different screens. The zoning here is R19, 9,000 square foot lot minimums. You can see here as well, this property you see here, this is Evans Lane in Lehigh. Initially, the applicant wanted to front lots out onto Evans. There's an agreement that's going to be in the works, and Mark could speak more of the details to this. That the property is annexed in the city now, but we're going to do a boundary line agreement with Lehigh City at some point, and this property will then go to Lehigh. Am I saying that wrong, Mark?
No, that was part of the boundary agreement that we negotiated with Lehigh City that was approved back in December, and so it's just those few lots that would detach and go back to Lehigh. From a development standpoint, the layout works better. It was already going to be fronting on that road, so double fronting was a little bit problematic, and we felt like that was a good compromise. to come to with Lehigh on a lot of other boundary issues. If you'd like, maybe later during staff comments, or director's report, I could give you more information on the boundary agreement if that's something you're interested about.
So just to orient you on this picture, north is to the left, so the plat itself is kind of on side. So this would be the north end of Pirelli Meadows, as you see here. Then we have the lower addition here. Again, north is to your left. This would be directly south of the screen we just looked at. And then again, a little north is to your left also. This would be on 145 north. These would be on your right. These are all single-family lots, larger lots, at least 9,000 square feet. There is open space. There's the trails proposed along the wash, the drainage channel there. And again, so at this time, there's still some additional things we need to look at with the applicant. And so up to you, Chairman, if you'd like to open up the public comment at this time, take public comment, and then we can continue for a full discussion at the next meeting.
Okay. I will open up the public comment at this time. The Planning Commission has not received any of this information in our packet, so we'll go ahead and open it up to public, but we're not going to comment on it this time.
Right, and I was aware that NORA did not do a staff report because it would be continued. Just in case somebody was here, I wanted to at least show the plats here.
We want to be fair to the public. So we will open up public comment this time for item number 5, public hearing, preliminary plat for Pirelli Meadows.
I'll make it next time, maybe too.
Hi there.
I'm Patrick Cox. I live on 2116 West Cox Street in Lehigh. So the street that turns over by where Hopkins Lane would join in, I guess. And more or less on the plan, we just had a couple of questions that we were a little uncertain about. One is, would Evans Street connect with the Hopkins Lane for some, get people out of the neighborhood? And then
I'm sorry, I was distracted. What was the first question? What is the connectivity where?
Oh, the connectivity between Evans Street and Lehigh, and then I think it's Hopkins Lane. It looks like it would connect, but because there's no plan for Lehigh on that property, we weren't sure.
Right here where the cursor is located is what he's talking about.
We'll get to that one. We'll answer you after you're done with your
Okay,
comment.
that's fine. The next one was the open space. There was private open space, and we just don't know what that means or what that is down below. And then the street width was the other one. We weren't sure if the street widths would match up in the neighborhood throughout, or if some of the roads in Saratoga Springs would be narrower than the ones in Lehigh. We just weren't sure. And I think those are all the questions we had. I'm from a public comment standpoint, it'd be nice to have that road connected. I assume it'll probably connect. And then also, when those roads do connect, if the street widths kind of stay the same. But those were just our questions that we had, so.
Okay, we've taken notes. We'll respond to those once we've closed open comments.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you for your time. Any other comments from item number 5? Okay, let's go ahead and close public comments at this time, and if we'll turn the time over to city staff or the applicant if they are here to answer the questions of the public.
Yeah, on the first one, when we talk about this property will be disconnected from Saratoga and going to Lehigh. So when this property then develops in Lehigh, that road connection from Hopkins to Evans will be made by whoever develops that the Lehigh property.
Could you address the street widths?
I'll turn it over to Gordon.
I don't know exactly what the street width is, pavement width is in Lehigh, but Saratoga's is narrower. Saratoga's is 29 feet of asphalt. I'm sure that's narrower than Lehigh's. Same capacity. It's a narrower street is just safer. It discourages speeding, and there's less environmental impact. So as far as capacity is concerned for traffic volumes, it's the same, but it's a safer and more environmentally friendly street.
Okay, and then there was a question about private open space. What's the
Yeah,
definition
just
of that?
to address the comment, our city code, the ordinance requires that residential subdivisions, when they come in, that they provide open space for the residents to use. Now, it's not going to be, we're not going to be standing there on guard, hey, you're from Lehigh, you can't use it, but our code just requires that these subdivisions require a certain amount of open space.
Okay, so we've addressed all the comments that are there. Did you have something else to say? All right, so we're going to close public comment at this time, and which we did, sorry. I will entertain a motion to continue this item number 5 until January 25th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
I move that we continue item number 5 until January 25th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We had a second from Commissioner Kilgore. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Can we, sorry, before you vote, can we get just clarification? You're continuing the item, but you've closed the public hearing. So you're not holding another public hearing at the next meeting, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, we could open
Have
it
that
again if we wanted to,
clarification.
but we've closed it at this
When you
point.
say continue the item, it's listed as a public hearing, and so just that clarification in that motion would be helpful.
Okay. We
will
Clarification.
amend the motion to continue the item with closed public hearing for January 25th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
The motion has been amended. The second?
Second.
Second agrees. Any other questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, number 6, item number 6. This is a public hearing. It's a community plan for Intermountain Healthcare Medical Center located on the southeast corner of Pioneer Crossing and Crossroads Boulevard. Let's see. Who is going to be presenting that today?
So,
Thank you very much. We'll turn the time over to you.
Yeah, IHC has plans down the road to construct a hospital in the city. They are looking at purchasing SLR property, and that property falls under the planned community zone. And of course, the planned community zone is governed by a few documents. One of those is the district area plan. Within the district area plan, you have to come in for a community plan, which is kind of a, 20,000 foot level view of the property. And then with the completion of the community plan, you get into finer details of the development through a village plan. So at this time, IHC is just looking to do some of the very basic standards through the community plan. And of course, the site here on the map, governed by the district area plan. There's several different place types within the district area plan. They have chosen to come under what's called the business park place type. The property they'd like to acquire is approximately 40 acres. And within that, those 40 acres, they're allowed 1.6 million plus square feet of non-residential development. That's based on the maximum floor area ratio of up to 0.93. They are proposing to build less than that. They're proposing to build 1.2 million would be at their build out. And just a little closer view of the property there. Items of discussion tonight we can discuss are the development process, and I've got slides of these further setbacks, building height, lighting, signs, and of course being a hospital, being a care facility at some point, they would like to have a heliport for helicopter service in and out. The process is outlined here. This process is nothing new. This is the standard process that was approved for the crossing community plan just down the street. Excuse me. This just outlines who approves what types of development within the plan when it comes in for approval. For instance, a new village plan, that would go to city council for approval. You look at a site plan for non-residential uses is approved by the planning director. But this is taken right from the same approval process as the crossing. So this right here is nothing new to the city. Setbacks, they're requesting front, shown on the landscape buffer, which we can look at later. Sides 20 feet, rear 20 feet. However, when you get to a hospital facility, you're obviously going to have parking around, you're going to have landscaping, you're going to have much greater setbacks than 20 feet. These are then the setbacks which would be adjacent to public roads. Again, these drawings here, these have come right out of the crossing community plan as well. So again, these drawings here, these two slides are not a new requirement in the city. They figure they're right by the crossing, keep some uniform development standards, and they'll use the same. And that was along, of course, Pioneer Crossing would be the landscape buffer here. Then medical and exchange. There are some points in some notes in the plans here that actually call it out as Commerce Drive. That's obviously not Commerce Drive, it's Exchange.
While we're on this, could you indicate the difference between what our normal code is and what they're requesting, so we have an idea of the difference in the setback?
I'd have to get into the code a little bit. You're looking at a 9-foot park strip, 5-foot walk, at least in this case. That's the standard there. I'll go back if the keyboard will cooperate here. The asphalt trail, that's along the existing road. That's standard now, for instance. The landscape buffer you see, as you can see in the drawing, the purpose of that buffer is to block cars and headlights from public roads. That's standard there as well. Building height, right now the zone is permitted to be 50 feet. They're proposing 125. That would be 7 stories. Hospital facilities generally have greater ceiling heights. It hides equipment. It's, first floors in hospitals typically are quite tall. 60 feet for a parking structure, should they build a parking structure. And so that will be written into the community plan that they have different heights than what other zones would allow. Lighting, standard lighting packages here. This is the same lighting you see in the crossing. Typical street lights in the city would have to have a bell and shade on them. You can see those along a lot of the public right-of-ways, the crossing, and then now IHC have asked for this standard light design here. One thing they would have to add to this light would be a decorative base. They're not showing a decorative base, which that is a requirement we would want to have. Not a big deal to include that, but that would have to be included as part of the approval. Signage, if you're familiar with IHC, they have a typical standard sign package they use for all their facilities. And of course, they would like to do the same for this facility. It does give wayfinding, common visual items for people to look at when they're looking for a facility. And so this sign package would then be part of the community plan, which these would then be the approved signs. Of course, in the city right now, we don't allow pole signs. This is deemed to be called a monument sign, but for all purposes, this serves as a type of a pole structure. It's not a low profile sign by any means. And so there would be this would be an additional requirement. Similar again to the crossing, you see the crossing sign on Redwood Road, the pole sign that they have there. Again, that type of sign. The standard sign code, that's not allowed. Additional sign, lower profile signs here. You see the sign on the number on the building. They use those. That helps patients. It helps people visiting the hospital actually find buildings that they need to go to. They're also requesting a heliport. Obviously, hospitals have, a lot of hospitals now have helicopter facilities to bring in and out patients, critical care, that sort of thing, transfer patients. So at some point, they would like to have that. Commissioner Cunningham did bring up a point. He had a concern. I think you probably all have an email from him that he would have some concerns. How this integrates, we have the RC park not far away. Obviously, things in there, there's some conflict going on. There are FAA requirements, obviously, that govern a lot of this stuff here. And so there had to be some coordination between the two uses here to take care of that. Open space and trails. Of course, we have trails along the major arterials. The Pioneer Crossing Trail already exists. There will be landscaping around the perimeter of the property. And then the open space by the code right now, the DAP is required to have 15 to 17% open space, which could be any kind of form of landscaping, trails, that sort of thing. And the proposal would meet that. So the options you have before you would be, of course, forward a positive recommendation to the City Council, forward a negative recommendation, or continue if you have issues to further discuss, to continue to another date.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Is the applicant here? We invite you to join us and tell us who you are and where you live, and you can have a seat if you like.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
My name's Tom Uriona. I'm representing Intermountain tonight in the capacity of its corporate real estate director. Thank you for your time. I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Okay.
Be happy to do that.
Tom, did you want to add anything to the presentation that was given?
No, I think for now it's covered the bases adequately. But,
okay. Please join us, and we'll open up for public comment and
okay.
ask you questions as we have them. Okay. All right, this is a public hearing. Item number 6, we're going to open up for public comment at this time. If anybody has any comments about item number 6, we invite you to come forward. Keep your comments to 3 minutes, and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Ken Evans.
Hello.
I live at 11282 West, 8570 North. It's still a county address, which I hope changes soon. I'm probably the closest resident to and property owner to this proposed development, the community plan. I've had a chance to review it in detail. It was posted on the city website, and I would just like to state that I'm supportive of the community plan that has been presented.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Are there other comments for item number 6? Okay, we will close public comment at this time, and we'll turn it over to the Planning Commission for comments. You were the first one to look at me, Commissioner Steele.
Well,
so-
I will defer to anybody else that wants to make comments.
Oh, we would love to hear from you.
Well, I have several. Number one, in your landscape areas where you have rock called out, could we get 2 colors and 2 sizes? Thought you could. Oh, his is.
Is your mic lit up green?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. You have called out the light poles as being black, and I fought for black around Smith's, and they sent me on a field trip at night, and I found that Boyer was indeed correct, that if you paint that pole champagne, it just blends in. And if you look at your facility in Riverton, your Riverton facility, it looks like a storage lot for black light poles. They really stand out. So would you be willing to change that and have them champagne with a decorative base?
I think we'd be willing to talk about it.
Okay. Since you're building a hospital, and do you have any kind of a date as when you might start on this property?
We don't.
Okay. Right now, we don't have a ladder truck within our city. We have to depend on other cities to provide a ladder truck. And so you're building almost a 7-story.
Well, let me clarify that. We're asking for the ability to build up to 7 stories.
Okay.
We may not initially build that high.
Okay. How do you feel about building a hospital without a ladder truck within our city limits?
If I could, that is a great hypothetical question, but the city has plans to try and acquire one within about the next 1.5 to 2 years.
Okay.
So I don't think that it's a relevant question necessarily for his application. You're certainly welcome to go down there. My point is I think we'll have one by the time, even if they were to pull a building permit tomorrow, which they wouldn't, I think we would have a ladder truck here before they would open their doors, so it makes it somewhat of a moot question.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm glad to hear it, because I hate to see a hospital open without that. So, it's not just fire. Chemical spills and all sorts of things can happen, so I feel better knowing that we're going to be getting that. In some of your facilities that I have unfortunately had to use, some of your equipment has been very visible to the outside, to the parking lot and whatnot. Is there any way when you put that mechanical equipment in that you can screen it with a screen wall?
Well, I think that's part of what we'll do when we go through the village plan.
Okay. And I'm also going to just say this, it'll come in the village plan, but we don't want any outside ladders on the building to get to the roof. We need inside access.
Be happy to discuss that at that point.
Okay, okay, all of that, and let's see. Now then, we come to the heliport, which again, I see that you want to work with the FAA. Were you aware that we have the air park near the lake?
No, I was not, but we will have to meet current FAA standards for that heliport, and I can guarantee you will want it here.
Well, I know we want the heliport, but we also want the air park. And that was stated in a meeting and by our mayor, he was very adamant about that we want to protect that. So, and they're flying drones out of there, they're flying model planes out of there, and I just found out they're flying the things that have the propeller in the back are taking off from there. And I did not know that that was part of it. So, and I think you're closer than 5 miles.
So what is your question?
How can you work that out? Will it be through flight plats?
We'll work it out through FAA and flight plans.
Okay. Now then, we get to signs. We have held pretty firm to a 20-foot maximum height on signs. When the first meeting I attended as a planning commissioner, IHC wanted to put in a 20-foot high sign, and they were denied. And I thought that was not a smart thing to do, especially when just a few weeks later, I had an emergency run to American Fork, and I can't tell you how glad I was to see that sign. That blue and white sign stood out, and I thought, oh, I'm getting there. So I agree with the 20 feet. But you're not counting the base of it. How is the base a foot or 6 inches or?
They're usually a little more than a foot, but I mean, we can work through that if we have to modify the sign slightly to meet a 20-foot maximum. We'd prefer to get a variance if necessary for the base.
Well, the reason I'm asking is,
and the reason is because it's cost effective to use a current mold, which goes to patient cost.
okay, and the reason I am bringing this up is there's a gentleman behind you tonight that brought this up for his subdivision, and I used IHC as an example, saying that if we wouldn't give it to a hospital, why would we give it to him? And we made him bring his down some. And so to be consistent, I would like to see that capped at 20 feet. We've done it in all the other areas. I do believe that it should be no lower than 20 feet, but I don't think it needs to be any higher than 20 feet. And
What's on the screen right here, this is the sign. I pulled it out of the PDF instead of mine because it's a little more clear. So this would be what goes into the plan, and they're showing a 6-inch base. So the sign would be 20 feet, 6 inches above grade.
you've got a lot of blank space there.
Well, it may all need to be used. That's why we have it.
But I don't think 6 inches would be a problem for you, and it certainly would not set a precedent.
Well, it would be a problem in that it would require a new mold, which is not cheap.
Can't you put it on slab?
If you don't require the base, we probably could.
Well, since it is a community plan, we could dispense with the base.
Up to you.
6 inches.
Yeah, but the next person's
We'll
going to come in
discuss it. We'll
at
discuss it.
26, and then somebody's going to come in, well, can't I do 21? And then, yeah, it goes. So, anyway, that's one of them. And I agree with your secondary signage. I think that looks very nice. It's needed. Your directional signs, though, at 7 feet, and I noticed that on the examples that you gave, that, again, there's a lot of space that's not used.
Well, it could all be used, depending on how large the campus becomes.
Okay.
And where people need to be sent. So those wayfinding signs could eventually, the panels could all be used at some point.
you know what our wayfind, do we have any code for wayfinding? I know we have directional signs, and I understand why that won't work for you, because that we don't allow them more than 3 feet. And I understand that, but I think 7 feet is a little high. Especially
It's
where,
about a foot taller than, what are you, Mark?
oh, it'd be about a foot taller than,
Yeah. So it's about as tall as Mark, and when you're in a car and when you're trying to find a location, that's not large. I'm just trying to give perspective to
okay.
this issue.
We, and he, I think he's a little taller too. But anyway, my concern there would be that normally they are put at an intersection of the streets, and you need to keep it back 15, so we have a 15-foot line of sight, clear sight area. And so that should be considered.
Yeah, that'd just be standard to stay outside that clear vision area for safety. That would apply to any sign.
But I'm seeing it shown otherwise, so I just want to make sure that as you're going forward and come to us with a village plan.
When we come to village plan, that all of those issues will be addressed.
Okay. I believe that's all I have. I'll be hopefully we'll see a village plan before too long. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are welcome in our neighborhood, or in our
Thank you.
community.
I think we're all potential customers. Next.
I can go.
Man,
So I just have a question for the city. This is a legislative action as far as the rezone, but the things such as like building height and sign height they're part of the code. So how
Right.
much leeway do we actually have with what we request if it's part of the code administratively?
Well, technically, it's not a rezone. The zone's already there. The PC zone's in place. This is part of the PC zone. Really, as a community plan and village plan, the door's kind of wide open for what you deem to recommend to be appropriate, and then ultimately the city council and their legislative discretion can then approve or deny or modify any changes.
Okay. So first, I just wanted to give appreciation to the city. I think this was a fantastic packet. I greatly appreciated the notes on the process and the tables and things. I think it also helps the public. If the public is reviewing this, you have the process from the community plan all the way down to the village plan. Thought it was great and educational. Even for myself, I thought it was intuitive and helped digest and evaluate it. I also appreciate it appears that the applicant was willing to work with the city, and it was a very thorough applicant when we get to the bottom of that, and it said most of the things comply. That's always good for us. It's helpful to us, so I appreciate that. I'm okay with the signs. I find them useful and intuitive. I think everyone here has probably at least seen or used an Intermountain facility. The big numbers on the buildings, all of that is very helpful in trying to find where you need to go. The 7 stories, the 125 feet, the max height in that zone is 50, and it's requesting a 75-foot variance, and so that is by far going to be the tallest building in the city. And so I understand why. I'm assuming it's going to be kind of like the American Fort Tower, or is it shorter than that?
To give you some.
Are you building a tower, Mark?
Let's just say that I don't think they're going to be the tallest building forever. I do think we're going to see other applications. I think we're going to see other Class A buildings that will come in that will be comparable in size. So although this is probably the highest that we've seen so far, I certainly don't think it's going to be the last, and I certainly think that we will see other buildings in comparable proportion and size. So I wouldn't say that this is going to be the tallest one.
So if that's the case, then perhaps staff could potentially look at that zone with the max building height. If we're going to see that in the future and it's 50, they're asking for 125, which I understand, but that, it's going to be a repetitive thing. Perhaps that needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, we've actually had some interest in some property in the city now that we're in the regional commercial, that's 50 feet, the potential owner, or they may be the owner now, would like to actually hire. So that actually may be something that will be coming through the process here shortly.
And if I could on that, at the retreat, we discussed this with the council, and the thing that we've kind of realized is that our current code doesn't really lend itself well to some of these larger scale products. And we need to reconceptualize that. We've talked briefly about that, and I think you're going to see some code amendments across various zones and things of that nature that will be coming back and looking at this saying, okay, when we grow up, what do we want to be and what code do we need in place to do this? So to that point, I don't think Tom's request is too dissimilar to what we're going to be talking about on many different fronts.
And if I could just make one other, thank you, Mark, and if I could make one other comment, our story heights are a little different than the typical story height. Our first floors are usually about 20 feet with clear height, and then 16 after that. And the reason for that is the stuff you don't see above the ceiling.
Sure.
And the ability to access it and deal with it. So that's why the 125 feet is there for that reason.
How, has there been any discussions with piping that canal?
We will have a conversation with the canal company about that when we get into the design. I think they will control whether they will allow us to pipe it or not. It's a situation that we will evaluate. I mean, we could pipe it and use that area for parking at some point. So there's a cost benefit that we've got to look at there. Okay,
so I mean, I hate to get into hypotheticals, but assuming they, Mark, his canal company's been an interested party in working with applicants in piping canals?
In the sense of working with them in that the applicant pay 100% of the cost, absolutely. As far as them paying any cost, no, they're not interested.
Okay, so pending Intermountain comes back and says, we're going to pay for it, we don't foresee an issue?
It's probably a detail we will be working out, in later phases. At this point, again, this is still high level enough and conceptual enough that I think it's a good thought. It's just probably a detail we haven't worked out at this point.
Okay. I echo Commissioner.
We did make that code amendment, of course, as you know, that requires the piping of canals.
I echo Commissioner Steele's comment on lighting. I think we're just concerned with making it as less obtrusive as possible to the residents, whatever color that may be. And then oddly enough, I also recognize the need for a heliport. I don't think anybody is going to choose, do we have a heliport or do we have somebody die? And I think there's occasion where life is that critical and it's hanging in the balance. I don't think anybody up here is going to debate that a heliport isn't useful. We do have the model plane park or the RC plane park, but as a drone flyer myself, I also understand that Camp Williams shuts down half the city for drone flying as it is. And so as a recreational drone user, there's a little bit of selfish concern that having a hospital shuts off even more of the city, and I have to go out in the middle of nowhere to, fly a drone a little bit. So it would be good to have a plan as things get further down the road on how Intermountain plans to address, I guess, some of the hobby and recreational use that we celebrate here in the city.
Well, and we understand that issue, and when it comes down to it, FAA is going to have a lot of weight on where we can eventually put that heliport. So we'll be sensitive to that issue.
Something to be aware of. I wouldn't just pass that off and sweep it on the rug. I think it would be an emergent concern. So that's all I had.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I do have one question actually. Are the signs going to be backlit or how will they be lit?
They're lit internally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kilgore.
I had also similar questions about, well, first of all, welcome, and
thank you.
I do use AC quite a bit. unfortunately. The code 19.04, our city code, allows the city council to reduce one setback by no more than 10%. I guess this is a question to the planning staff. Does the DAP override this restriction?
Yeah, with this type of zoning, you're basically writing the code for how each of these individual community plans within the PC zone, in 50 years, we could have 50 different community plans. They could all have different zoning. It's basically what the city council agrees that, yeah, that's best for the city.
Okay. So I also had a question about the helicopter flights and such. And, and I was just wondering if maybe that's another area of the code that we look at, because there's probably issues that we have to think about with power lines, drones as discussed, cell towers, as well as the lighting for the heliport and things like that. And maybe something that I asked the planning staff to take a look at, whether, where we can change or amend, if as necessary, the city code so that it does allow for these kinds. We also have the we have the IHC, we have University of Utah as well, and maybe they'll want the same sort of facilities as well. So, I was also wondering about the signage. Do you know how the signage was developed for IHC? Is it based primarily for visual, or is there like an actual science behind?
Well, I don't pretend to be a signage expert, but there is a basis behind it, and it provides because wayfinding on any hospital campus is either very useful or very daunting, and this sign package, if you will, has been refined over a number of years to provide for the most efficient way to, one, tell you when you are at an Intermountain facility, and then once you're there, how to maneuver within the facility. So there is, I guess, some science behind it, and it's also a branding issue as well. But it's not casual in its design. It's come about over a lot of years of finding what's the best way to get patients and patrons and visitors to the campus and then throughout the campus. And to the point that Commissioner Steele made, there are times when all you care about is seeing the colors of that sign to know that you're at a facility, because you are in a situation where you don't care about anything else.
Right.
So.
Well, then I had the similar question to the city. Our 20-foot max height, is there any science behind it, or is it aesthetics, visual? I mean,
I'd probably defer to Mark. I wasn't here, and maybe Mark wasn't either when that code came through was developed. But obviously, we use a case in point where I used to work and drive down State Street in Orem City. Doesn't look too good, does it? A lot of pole signs, a lot of, my opinion, ugliness. I think the intent was to keep, lower profile signs, keep the aesthetics there, kind of really have that almost as a brand for Saratoga City. And we're not the only ones that outlaw those types of signs as well. Park City, Summit County, they don't allow those types of signs. So I think it's just the look, the feel, what the city council wanted in the city.
Okay.
And just, again, because it is a community plan within the district area plan, they have the ability to make the request. Whether it gets approved or not, you all will make a recommendation, the council will ultimately decide, but this is the request, and we're processing that request.
Well, I guess, we don't have, not that schools use a lot of signage, but we don't have a lot of control over, in fact, we don't have any control over what schools do, or school districts. And I think a hospital's signage is a lot more critical, mission critical than a school sign. So I think if we don't have much control over schools, then I don't know if insisting on a lot of control over hospital signs makes much sense. That's why I was just trying to get some kind of a feel. And I could understand that branding is a big issue. contributor, I'm sure, for your signs, but I think it is something that was probably more or less science-based, maybe it's through experimentation, many years of experiment and such. Whereas it's a little bit more aesthetic focus on our side rather than scientific. Not to say that we should throw out the sign restrictions for the same purposes that Sandy and David has said, but I just want to know where our leeway is, and I think I'm actually pretty in favor of being flexible. So, but there was, I did have a question though. I thought on the packet it said that your maximum sign was going to be something like 32 feet. Is that no longer the case? Is that?
I don't recall that, but.
I thought I referenced it here. Oh well, if I find it, I'll bring it up again. Let's see. What consequences are there by allowing? So there's a page. It was on page 9 in the packet. So I don't know what the page is on the. There was something about big box fitness centers and fueling stations to be permitted rather than conditional use. And I was wondering if by saying that these uses are no longer conditional but rather permitted, does that tie the City Council and the Planning Commission into an administrative decision or recommendation, even though there may be issues about parking, traffic, and nuisance like light and noise, odors and stuff to the residential areas? So just wondering how that would, by allowing that, and also just why use the regional commercial instead of the business park for the conditional permitted uses, since it's already I thought it was a bit based on business park, so why allow for the conditions and the conditional uses, make them permitted if?
Yeah, and the applicant can address that as well since it's their request, but if you see here on the screen, under the guiding development standards, we do list the permitted uses comply with the business park, but they also say that hospitals, medical office space, medical clinics, ancillary medical support shall be deemed permitted uses as well, so they're adding those into the group of permitted uses along with whatever the business park permits as well.
So just a clarification on conditional use law in Utah. It is basically a type of permitted use. I know that the term conditional use, we think of that and it gives us warm fuzzies, and we think that's better than, we have more discretion than a permitted use, but really not so much. The law says that we shall grant a conditional use permit if they can comply with standards that are set up to mitigate detrimental impacts. So it's almost the same as a permitted use, because we have to establish the standards for which we grant conditional use permits. There isn't a whole lot of, it's maybe a small amount of additional discretion with conditional use permits, but it's pretty much a permitted use anyway.
Yeah, so I'm okay with it, but we do have different zones, and since it's a business park, well, why the need for refueling station, fitness centers, and big box to be permitted rather than conditional? Since I mean, if it was regional commercial, then it would be permitted. But since it's a business park, those things are considered conditional for reasons. Fueling stations, that's a big issue. So I'm just wondering if that's like a necessity, or why do we have that? What is the purpose of that request? Is it just to give flexibility to the applicant, or?
Can I just ask where you're reading that at?
Yeah. So again, in the overall staff packet, it was page 9, but I don't know what it is in the particular applicant packet. So under H, it says code criteria.
Are you in the community plan or the staff report? Okay, H, code criteria.
Yeah, and then it says right there 26.04. It says the application includes big box and general retail, office, and similar uses which are permitted PC zone. The proposal includes all this in the RC zone with several conditional uses being changed to, like big box fitness centers and fueling stations being changed to permitted. Why can't it just stay conditional since?
My initial guess is that the planner that wrote this used the format for a previous community plan, and that was probably actually part of that community plan, so that would not apply. That's my guess on that.
Okay.
I think that language was in the crossing when we approved that.
Okay, so can we get it back to regional? Because, I mean, if there's going to be a fueling station, I'd rather it be something that we consider than just to say, okay, we're administratively tied because we made this allowance.
To the applicant, do you plan on a fueling station?
No, we're just asking for what's permitted under the
Business park.
business park with the other uses specifically.
So.
Yeah, because
laid
again,
out.
it's conditional, so you're allowed to bring it up, but I'd rather it be something that we discuss, not be forced into saying, yeah, you can have a fueling station if you want. I mean, if you want it.
The question really should be, it's not, you're not going to have any more rights to say no with the conditional use permit than you would with the permitted use. So what you need to decide is that type of use, do you want that to be allowed in this area as part of this community plan? Do you want that to be an allowed place type? And if the question is no, you don't want that to be an allowed place type, and of course they can always amend the community plan later to make that a permitted place type. But if you don't want to allow it, just say no and don't allow it.
Okay,
I don't think IHC wants to do a gas station, but.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to disallow it. I just want it to be able to be something that we can consider like a normal conditional use request, a permit, just because maybe traffic patterns will change in the next 2-3 years. And so if it's a fueling station with all the other fueling stations that are already there, I want us to be able to consider that and the city council to be able to vote on it rather than be kind of tied to saying, oh yeah, we permitted it 4 years ago. You see what I'm saying? So if the applicant's okay with just the business park allowances, then it should be a problem if we cross this out.
Plus those specifically requested.
Could you be more specific when you say that?
So big box, fueling station, and
The medical uses.
I know that this may be in the future, but a fitness center, they might actually provide for their employees. So I'd hate to see us say they can't have it. And
I totally agree. I'm not saying that. That's why I like the conditional use, because it's something that comes up to us and the city council.
An ancillary use could be a fitness center for employees.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't want to not permit it. I don't want to disallow it. I just want it to come up like a regular business park.
Kevin, how would we do that?
I think you could, staff, I would just suggest that staff, or you give the feedback to staff to work with the applicant to address your concern prior to the council making a decision on this.
Okay, especially if this is just a carryover from an old thing, then I don't want that to all of a sudden tie our hands in any way. But I'm not against those things, but I would like, especially something like a fueling station, to be something that we consider because of traffic and all the noxious stuff, that's associated with fueling stations, so.
Plenty to have a fueling station, but.
Okay, sorry to belabor that point. Were any studies, we brought this up during our general plan review about, you have a report about wildlife, but what about like access, transit, and migration routes? Is there anything about that in the environment and wildlife study or report? And what I mean specifically is we have a lot of indigenous populations of animals, and they use the open areas right now, the agriculture areas, to cross back and forth. Mm-hmm. And in our general plan review, was it the general plan review? I guess it was. We talked about trying to at least make an effort at looking at where the migration routes are and provide areas where animals can connect to continue once the buildup is, once there are buildings there. And I was just wondering because I saw the environment and wildlife study, but I was wondering if it included, it didn't say anything about migration routes or transit routes. I wonder if that's something that you've seen.
No.
Okay. So, and that being the case, then how, it's part of our vision. David, is there anything that we can require about that, or is that just something that the report's done and it wasn't in there?
Yeah, the community plan here doesn't list anything about wildlife. You can have that as a condition just so they verify that, this isn't gonna, prohibit or, otherwise, cause that to, whatever language you want to put to have them address that, just to make sure it's covered.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's something that the Planning Commission cares about much. I mean, we did include it in our vision, and all that stuff, so something that we should at least have at least a cursory look at, probably.
Ironically, we've blocked that off with the crossing, which is where the antelope used to cross, and we blocked off their food source with another.
But they did provide underground.
On what?
They did provide an underground route,
That's true, yeah.
as, four-legged as well as two-legged.
No.
Perhaps the city could look at some urban hunting plans.
None elsewhere.
I'm bringing it up because it was something that we did discuss for quite a bit, not quite a bit, but a little bit, and we wanted to be part of our future vision as well. So
I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But I'll just make a comment. I live in Bountiful, not far from Lakeview Hospital. I don't know if anyone else in this room lives in Bountiful, but there are deer all over in Bountiful. And I can tell you that they find their way to wherever they want to go, regardless of what you put up. I've seen a deer jump an 8-foot fence without even thinking twice.
Yeah, don't even grow tulips in Harriman.
Yeah, so, I mean, I appreciate the concern. If that is an issue over time, I think they tend to find a way to deal with it. But
I will also tell you that at one point on a different project, I called the state to see if there were any protected, what we did. We had bald eagles, and we had deer and antelope and fox. And they said, no, we don't have any requirements.
okay.
So, I was surprised, but I guess that's their attitude.
Back to the canal. What if the irrigation company doesn't allow the canal to be piped? What's the plan then? Do you have any plan?
if they require that it not be piped, they will probably at least let us bridge it. We would probably then bridge it and use the area to the northwest as maybe some additional parking and or open space.
Okay.
Our code allows that exception if the canal company says no, but it's in their benefit for so many different reasons. Evaporation losses, liability, fewer kids getting in the canal and playing, and the agreements that they typically make people sign when there's an encroachment, when they pipe the canal or put a bridge crossing over, whoever's doing the encroachment has to maintain those facilities. So really it's the canal company has very little reason to say no in most cases.
I figure that's the case. I just asked because so much of what was in the staff packet expected it to be piped, and I just thought, so what happens if it's not, allowed? Sounds like you had that covered, so no issue. When I was reading through the packet, I noticed there wasn't much text about abiding by the clear site triangle restrictions for plant material and signage. But then as I kept reading through, then there was some text about that, so I think we're okay. And that's something that we'll look at anyway in the village plan.
I
yeah.
think we'll need to address that in greater detail.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. So on page 7, this is where it said 32.5 feet for the pole height. iPad keeps shutting down. Oh. So let's see. 911. Oh, no, it's page 26.
That's for lighting, correct?
What's that?
That's for lighting?
Yeah, it says here actually 32.5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And David asked where I saw that, and I just now got to it. Oh, yeah,
I
so...
think you were thinking it was signage when it was lighting.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it was lighting. It says section 19.11, lighting shall govern with the exception that parking lot poles may include fixtures of the type and design shown below. Poles shall be black and are permitted to be 32.5 feet in height, whereas we have a restriction for 20 feet for light.
Yeah, so we're asking for a higher pole.
Okay. So my question was, how come? Why so much higher is it?
It allows less poles and more coverage for a larger parking area.
As a point of clarification on that, that's the same height approved at the crossing. It's 32 and a half.
Okay. So is that something where our code's just outdated again?
It's just, that's what they requested, the council approved it. I mean, I think it adequately serves the purpose of lighting the parking lot. Then to go back to the wildlife, just looked up the code. The wildlife mitigation plan, that's addressed at the village plan stage.
Okay. Okay, then let's look at it at that time. You were going to say something, Sandy, about the light height?
Oh, I was going to say that's what we approved for the crossing. And for large uses like this, I think we're going to see more request for it. The only thing we have to be careful about is our dark sky ordinance.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, that's why I thought the 20-foot light pole was based on the dark sky ordinance. So if we say we're giving them 32, then aren't we violating that?
I think the same amount of light is projected. There's just less points of projection. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What's it say?
No, I was just going to say they build lots of these things, and so I would say they kind of have their preferences and the things that they're looking for, and so, you know, just as a general observation, they probably have reasons that are good, and you know, where we've done this in other places, maybe it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, again, to the planning staff. Okay, so just logically, if you are a small developer, you are restricted to the 20-foot height limit. But if you're a large developer and you could have a community plan or a DAP, then you could make it as tall as you want practically. I mean, within limits, within dark sky limits. But it just seems like it's kind of weird that the bigger you are, the more you could violate the code. And the smaller you are, the more you have to stick to it. And it just seems kind of counterintuitive for something like light.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
but really the whole inherent nature of the PC zone is that you can do different code that other zones can't.
And you're just way bigger. So you could have half the city violating the dark sky, well, the height limit, while the smaller guys can't do that. So you know, that just kind of doesn't make sense with light. But
you're not violating it really.
To your point, though, I mean, you know, the property owner could sell to some smaller business on another parcel, and we may be having this conversation with a smaller business. It's really a function of the zone, not necessarily the size of the developer. And so I think that, you know, we're looking at an area that is the reason for the DAP is so that development can move quickly, so that it can adjust to developing trends. It can be competitive. It can have, you know, kind of the ability to respond to the market, because again, we're dealing with such a large area in the DAP. So I think that there's definitely room for us to be flexible, and that was the original intent of the district area plan in the first place, which was to allow for us to consider different things. For example, earlier today we were talking about height. Our current code does not anticipate the development standards that we will need in order to comply with Class A office buildings. Just because we don't currently have it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that we have not had to address those specific issues. And I think one of the things that I've experienced in 7+ years of being here is that within the DAP we are learning that there are elements of Title 19 that just don't work, that fundamentally should be changed. And so from where we were at 7 years ago to where we are today, Title 19 has made vast changes so that it's more conducive to today's current environment. There are some things that we've held rigidly to because that's the look that we want for our community. But we've already kind of given up the fight on street poles in this particular area. If it were right up next to the base, I'd say we probably are going to be a little more restrictive, but it complies with the dark sky ordinance. They're not uplighting, so you know, does a pole height really matter, especially when our arterial poles are more akin to the poles that we're seeing in parking lots than they are the 20-foot poles that we see in our residential neighborhoods. So I think there's an evolution that's taking place, and I think that as we consider more and more, you know, of the developments like this, we're just going to continue to modify and evolve. Not saying that the past is wrong, just saying that the future might look different.
Well, and I completely agree with what you just said. I guess maybe I sounded sarcastic. What I meant was that we are evolving. It has nothing to do with the applicant. I'm sorry if it sounded like that. That's not what I meant. What I'm saying is that if we are allowing larger developments to have higher heights and such, then it doesn't make sense necessarily to have smaller heights for the smaller guys, you know, for the smaller zones, not the applicant, but the zones. So I think that's part of the evolution process. That maybe that's something that I mean, you asked last time about what we should look at this coming year, and some of the things that maybe we could ask the planning staff to look at, and that's part of it. I think is pole height, signage height, especially if we have these DAPs that can make them much larger, then it doesn't really make sense. As long as they're in compliance with the dark sky ordinance, then it doesn't make sense to necessarily restrict it 20 feet, unless it's in the residential area or something like that. So anyway, that's the comment I wanted to make. Is there sufficient water for the primary and secondary water for this development? And also, what about flooding?
If I can just jump right on that, just so you're aware, the church has thousands of acre feet that are currently in our drinking water system. They have canal rights that are, you know, vastly going to exceed the needs. You know, you've got to realize that all of the acreage that's being irrigated, we have the water rights that will ultimately offset that. So from a water standpoint, it's not even a question. From Central Utah Water, which the church has a contract for 10,000 acre feet, it's resolved. So not even a question or an issue at this point.
Okay.
What about water pressure up to 7 stories?
That is a unique thing. We may be looking at some designs where we pull it in from like zone 3. This is in zone 1. Right across the canal is zone 2. We probably will be pulling something in from zone 2 specifically for this facility to meet the higher pressures. But in addition to that, we'll deal with that at construction drawings and things like that. But I mean, even if we were in zone 1, you know, they have the ability to boost pressures to service their facility. So engineering question that's way down the list of things that we'll be going through.
Okay.
Just to note, we've posed questions like that, and we've been discussing that with the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
And we may not build, I mean, chances are we won't build a 7-story building to begin with. So the 7 stories is if in 10 or 20 years we need that capacity in heights, we want to be able to have that in place, not have to worry about it. Again, we'll cross that bridge as we get a little closer to really knowing what we're going to have there. And Gordon's been good to work with, and we'll figure that out.
Okay, thanks. Does the proposed road trail designs match up with the city's bike path plan? Do you know if that's been looked at?
And so what you see on screen here, the red trail is already in place. Sandra made a note about the underpass, and the deer wouldn't use one either with marks. The trail connection at some point will be here under Pioneer Crossing. And so the trails plan, you'd have trails along canals. Of course, you recall just north of here was the previous public comment, Ken Evans, about his trail along his property and how it's going to shift away from the canal now. So all those things are taken into consideration, and we do have the trail existing on Pioneer Crossing right now.
That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner
Thank you,
Kilgore.
by the way.
Okay, I have some comments. Given that this is a legislative decision and that I spent most of my vacation and most of my savings in a hospital this year, or last year, when it comes to the lighting, I don't care about 6 inches. I just want to be able to get to where I need to go in the time. Not done. Road connectivity. Just he talked about it a little bit. I just want to make sure people can get there. What kind of roads are you putting in here? What kind of infrastructure are you planning?
I mean, on the campus itself, we don't know yet. We won't, when we get to a site plan, then we'll have a much better idea of how traffic's going to flow on site.
Okay. Exchange Drive has a light coming in now, right? Is that where that is?
Yeah, so Exchange Drive will connect in. That's the road coming out of Walmart. This is showing the on-site improvements. We've worked with SLR quite extensively on the grid network that's through there. This is just showing, I believe, IHC's proportionate portion of that. I believe all these roads will be taken care of and addressed long before they're built, with a great network of a grid that will work in this area.
I just want to make sure we're accommodating the hospital the best we can. Height of the building, 7 floors. I don't have an issue with that, as long as, you know, we're going to need it. As this city grows, we're going to have a lot of demand there, so. As for the setbacks, the 10% justification, usually there's a reason. I just wanted to know from you, what's the justification for the setbacks requested?
I mean, in terms of why we want that setback?
Yes.
The 10 feet?
Yes.
I think it's probably required, if I'm not mistaken, right? The setback?
Because it says in the code that we have the ability to adjust that based upon a reason we just wanted to know what the reason was.
Yeah, I mean, go back to kind of what I made a comment earlier. You look at a hospital facility like this, they're showing setbacks, 10, 12, 20 feet. In reality, your building's going to be much further away. Like, you got to have fire access has to be around the building. You're going to have driveways. You're going to have parking stalls. You're going to have landscaping. And so I could confidently say that this building's never going to be anywhere near those small of setbacks to property line.
Okay, so I wanted to know. Monument signs, we just talked about that. With the heliport, just curious, will it be, with all these really tall light poles, will they also have a red light on top of them that's flashing? I mean, for the helicopter to not hit them? I just wanted to know if it's going to look like the American Fork Hospital, where it just looks, it's all red, light flashing.
It'll be adequately visible and adequately lit, excuse me, all of which are FAA requirements.
Does the FAA require red flashing lights on each of the lights as well? I would think so at the height.
And that'll just depend on what their requirements are. They'll have certain height restrictions within so many distance of the heliport, the helipad, that if it's high enough, it'll have a red light on it.
Okay, and then the only other question that I had that was not addressed was water, and I think that was just addressed, so. Those are all my questions. Do we have any other questions from the Planning Commission?
I do have a couple.
Commissioner Steele?
I have one comment. If you think about our city today, you could safely say we're 2-story and brown. And so I am glad to see something higher come in, and so that we get a little bit of variety. So I welcome that. The one thing I have noticed in other facilities is that you have put in the 20-foot signs, not only on your property, but as a wayfinding from the freeway or main streets. Now, we don't allow for signage,
Premises signage.
Are you going to be asking for that? And should we be thinking about that?
Well, any way we can get people to the facility, we're happy to see. But we understand that most cities don't allow off-premises signage, so we don't try and beat that drum. There will be Probably on the Mountain View corridor, there will probably be the typical blue hospital signage. But beyond that, other than what we will be able to get on premise, that's really all we'll be able to do.
Well, I can say.
Unless you, in your wisdom, think it's a good idea to do otherwise.
You know, your American Fork signage on, Main Street, that's off-premise, that was the sign that I needed to know where to turn.
And frankly, if we were to try and get that today, I don't think we'd get it.
Okay, well.
That was a sign that was put in a number of years ago. It's grandfathered. Their current ordinance would not allow us to do it.
Well, I hope our city would be lenient to make sure people know how to get to the hospital quickly, because it's seconds. Sometimes it comes down to seconds.
Yes, it does, and.
I suspect that could be something down the road that they would pursue. It's not requested at this time.
With you. We just, we know your current code doesn't allow it, but we're happy to have a discussion about it.
Well, I think a hospital is different than mom and dad's furniture store and the grocery store. I think hospitals, those seconds do matter.
Well,
and
we're happy to have that discussion.
Okay, can we instruct staff to take a look at it and see if it's possible if we do allow the off-premise, to hold it to either institutional uses or hospital uses?
And that'd be a question for Kevin, if that's content regulation, which we really can't regulate by content.
Does the city control signing on Pioneer Crossing, Redwood Road, and Mountain View corridor? Those are all state, those are UDOT, but does the city control signage on those?
On UDOT roads? No.
So, I mean, frequently you see like the blue, the hospital signs with arrows or whatnot. So the city wouldn't be able to control that anyway.
If you had a number of feet off of their property, maybe if it was on private property.
If it were on state property?
Well, I'm just saying the roads that are intersecting or closest to the hospital, you have Pioneer Crossing, Redwood, and Mountain View corridor.
Yeah,
and those are the
state
major
roads, and it's within the right of way for that state road. There's nothing that we could do about it. But I don't believe UDOT allows signs in their right of way. I'm not aware of that.
And we also have the buffers, and we have some space.
So, there's always a concern of content regulations, right? So
they usually allow three types. They'll have a sign that shows services, and they'll have a service sign for food. They'll have a service sign for lodging. They'll have emergency signage for hospitals. They don't play favorites. They just put folks up there, but it's a sign standard that they have that they allow.
We can look into that. I would say just give that feedback to staff and we'll discuss it.
It's like Salt Lake has signs for like Capitol Theater, and if you're looking for certain either city or what do you call it?
Cultural.
Cultural stuff, and the city puts that on the city streets. So I'm sure there's a way where you could put things like hospitals as well.
Mr. Ariana, thank you for your time. We're not letting you go yet, but I just wanted to thank you for your flexibility working with the city, and I can see that by your attitude tonight that you've been working with the city and you're very flexible. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate all the compliance within the packet that we received tonight too.
Thank you, and if I can take just a second, I want to thank Mark and Kevin and Dave and Gordon and Nora, who's not here, because it's been a collaborative effort. They've been very helpful, and I on behalf of Intermountain, want to thank them for that effort.
Okay, great, and we welcome you. So
thank you.
The two
I'll
things.
Just stay put until you're ready to tell me to really leave.
We're not letting you go yet. Okay, so the two things that were proposed to address in the conditions were to address the concern of permitted uses such as a fueling station with staff prior to a city council meeting. And the second one was to instruct staff to allow or invite staff to allow for off-premise signs for institutional uses, etc. And there was a discussion about content, but still, it can be a discussion. So if anybody who's proposing it can be an. So you got that? Okay, good. And then the other one of the other uses, I think that one was a condition, so, that we discussed, okay.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion.
And,
Oh, yes?
I don't know if we had two of us that wanted the champagne lighting fixtures or lighting poles.
We'll
rather than
address
the
that,
black.
we'll address that in the motion. I'll entertain a motion.
So, question.
We haven't gotten there yet, but
Ugh.
go ahead.
So, I'm in favor of the applicant simply looking at the color of the lamps. I don't know that I would prefer that being tied to a motion. Just something that they can work on with staff. You could evaluate that.
Sure.
I'm comfortable with that, but we'll see whoever proposes a motion.
Well, yeah, okay.
I will
Do we need
make
some more discussion?
Miss Sandy grumpy with me. I move to forward a positive recommendation to this city council for the Intermountain Healthcare Community Plan with the findings and conditions below, with the additional condition of,
My handwriting's, let me read that. Addressing the concern of permitted uses such as a fueling station with staff prior to city council meeting.
as stated by Chair Wilkins.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any questions on the motion?
Yes, I am going to belabor the point. If we recommend approval, we're recommending approval for black light poles. And it's going to be different than the rest of the crossing. And so therefore, I'm a little uncomfortable since that, then we're basically saying we approve it as it is. And if we want the lighter colored, then we need to put it in. And if nobody agrees with me, that's fine.
Was that lighter color part of a condition for the crossing?
Yes.
If
They
I,
insisted.
if I could, on all of their perimeter, they have the black poles. It's just the interior poles that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But again, where they're located and where the crossing is, where Boyer's at, I mean, you're going to have a tremendous amount of development. So I understand what you're asking for, which was consistency in the area. However, there's going to be so much separation, and there's already street poles throughout that are black. I'm not sure that it's going to ultimately, I get what you're saying, but it's not as if they're right across the street from each other and there's going to be a stark contrast.
No, I agree with that. But having a city council person and I went on a field trip because we thought black was the only way we could go. And much to our surprise, we looked at IHC in Riverton and we looked at the district in South Jordan? And the champagne blended in, the black looked like a storage place for black poles and in the parking lot. When they're that tall, if they really stand out. And so, I mean, if nobody agrees with me, that's fine, but the way we're doing it now, they have said in their plan that they want to put in black. And so, unless we say something, that's the way we're recommending approval.
Commissioner Chapman, you have the motion. How do you respond?
Perhaps the applicant could explain why they did champagne poles in Riverton.
The answer is I don't know exactly why we did Riverton that way. I think maybe a way, I'll just make a suggestion, that that it be either or as determined at the village plan level. And I think we're willing to look at that.
Just take a field.
Kevin, how would we put that consideration into the motion?
Just recommend that the council approve either one, or have that be an option to be discussed at village plan.
Okay, I would amend my motion to include consideration of either the black or the champagne poles, or another suitable color is determined by the applicant, city staff, is determined at the village plan level.
We have an amended motion. Do we have a second? Who's in agreement?
I second.
Commissioner Brush has the second on record right now. She already has the second. She needs to see if she agrees with the amended. Do you agree with the amended? She does. Any other questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
At the request of some of us, we're going to have a 5-minute break, and we'll come back.
Commissioners all hydrated.
Well, there's an extra bottle up here for you. This is good.